So patch 14.7 has been out on the live servers for actually a little about a week now. Funny enough, we had actually recorded the initial 14.7 meta-analysis on stream back on Saturday, but the problem was that the file actually ended up getting corrupted. There was no way for me to actually re-download from Twitch. Something was going weird in my creator dashboard. So today, I am re-recording the meta-analysis for you guys today. Usually, again, we do these on stream, as you can see up over here, @kai. So come check out the stream if you want to see, these meta-analyses live and ask questions in real time if you so desire. But let's just get started because there's a lot to cover in 14.7. And first off, none other to talk about than Yone. Heavenly Yone has just completely taken over the fucking meta like a fucking plague, to be completely honest with you. This shit's so annoying, man. Okay, so here's the gripe. The reason why a lot of people are frustrated with Yone is because, one, his dashing can sometimes feel a little bit unpredictable. Sometimes he does, he smurfs on your team and he kills like a 150 gold board and it's a Yone fucking 2. And number 2, Yone 2, speak of the devil, is just too strong. Yone 2 is just an absolute fucking monstrosity and basically just feels like a 2-star 4.5 cost. Like, it's disgusting how strong Yone 2 is, and we're definitely going to be seeing Yone nerfs in the upcoming next patch. But until then, let's talk about how exactly you can play around it. In general, before, it was first Umbral Yone, now, or after that, it was Behemoth Yone, and now we're at Heavenly Yone. Heavenly Yone has sort of popped up into the meta, and the big reason is because now Yone just really likes all the heavenly buffs, and Heavenly Yone actually has the highest cap. China was actually the first ones to start playing around Heavenly Yone. They were like, oh no, the Heavenly Yone is the best, and it was a little bit like, no, Behemoth Yone is the best, and there's a little bit of back and forth, but now we're seeing that everybody is now just sticking with Heavenly Yone being the absolute best. So China, you guys win this time. In terms of augments that really amplify this composition, things like Divine Rolls, Gargantuan Resolve, and Freaky Friday are all amazing in this line, and basically just let you hard force it. But keep in mind, this composition is just so fucking turbo contested. Like, it's disgusting. Personally speaking, I've been getting really frustrated because I would try to play this comp. Like, I'll be like, oh, my spot's so good for it. And then I just peek over, I see two other people, like 2 dunces, fucking trying to do the same thing. And then I'm like, I can't blame him. Like, I'm mad, but I can't blame him because their spot's also good for it. So I'm just like, shit, like, now what? So, personally speaking, I'm not gonna lie, I actually avoid this comp like the plague because I hate playing contested. But not gonna lie, there's a lot of augments that really do amplify this composition. It's not only just the 3 that I had mentioned before, things like stationary support, things like shopping spree, even too healthy is good in this composition, which is crazy because I feel like we haven't been talking about too healthy a lot these days. But the fact that you have Nico, you have 2 more, Kindred, and you have Kiana on the board. You get a lot of too healthy value actually out of it, which is fine. It's a little awkward because sometimes you can't get the Nico in, and she's also the least priority in terms of the heavenly units, so that can be a little bit awkward. But nonetheless, too healthy is still very strong. Things like Accomplice, which is good in like every fucking comp. Things like Combat Caster, which is good in every single fucking comp. Heavenly Crest can also punch in the right direction because Heavenly Crest is super strong, which I realize I haven't mentioned yet, but Heavenly Crest, if you get the Heavenly Crest, you're in for a very good time, usually, unless you're triple contested like me all the time. But sorry, the Heavenly Crest just goes on a shitter. Doesn't matter who it goes on. It's just a team-wide amplification. Specifically, it is Omnivamp for your whole team. So you basically just put on whoever. Usually it's a Kindred. And then you can roll your Sirocco for your Umbrella holder. And if you can get the Yone 3, good job. And if you can't, and if you're contested, usually the best approach is actually hit the Yone 2. Try to hit it earlier than everybody else. And then just push levels and then try to hit that Kane 2 before everybody else. And Kane 2, excuse me, with heavenly buffs is actually a composition that's been around since like the PPE, also known as Heavenly Yone, or sorry, Heavenly Kane, which has been around for a very long time, and people have actually played it before, but nobody really knew how to pilot into it. But now that Heavenly Yone is a thing, it's very easy to pilot into Heavenly Kane. They're like distant relatives, or they're like the 2 cousins that are related. I don't go out very much. I haven't seen my cousins in years. They're all Japan, so I don't know how that shit works. But anyways, moving on, before I just embarrass myself because of my lack of, knowledge and familial ties, that's depressing. Bard reroll. Bard reroll has sort of resurfaced back into the meta ever since the B patch where they reverted his attack speed nerfs, so now he's back to where he used to be, where, if you don't remember, he was kind of already falling out of meta. People were sort of realizing, hey, Bard needs like a lot, and like, I mean a lot to go right. He needs to hit Bard 3, you need to hit Tom Kench 3, you need to hit it within tempo. You also need to get really good items for Bard, and he's very item dependent. Double Ginsu, sorry, I'm not a fucking Canadian at Tim Hortons. double Ginsu's plus a Gunblade is typically the best way to go, and it's typically almost the only way to go. Things like Ginsu's GS and Gunblade are also fine as well, but relatively speaking, if you can get double Ginsu Gunblade, you are in a much better spot. Again, the biggest problem with this composition is just how much it costs and how long it takes to get everything online. And the problem with Bard 2 is that he doesn't always feel necessarily stable. It always feels like he's like close to finishing and closing out fights, but then he just doesn't. He falls flat, and then that's where you start bleeding out a lot of the HP, and you just start slamming your desk. So, but besides that, not much else to really talk about. I think we're all pretty aware of this line, at least if you played in the first patch of the set. But again, double Ginsu's on Bard. You do want to go with Red Kale if you can. You can go green for early game tempo if you really need it, if you're playing around a Story Weaver opener. Things like the Soraka, this is just the main variation. And again, not too much to talk about. Obviously, Lucky Ricochet is one of the best, if not the best augment in this composition. One last thing to note though, that new augment, I believe it's called 2-for-1, the Prismatic, which if any unit that you buy under 3 cost, you just get 2 copies of it. You could take it for this line, but I think some people have sort of realized, even with that little extra boost of economy, when you're lacking in Prismatic power, it can feel kind of bad. So just take it with a grain of salt. Like, yeah, it's fine in the line, but I don't think it's like amazing by any means. But anyways, let's move on over to Faded, another 3-cost reroll line, and something that was very prevalent in the previous meta. Aphelios hasn't really gone anywhere. He's actually still very, very solid, but he kind of has the same problem as Bard, where you need a lot of resources to really get shit online, because Aphelios 2 doesn't always feel the most stable. Nowadays, what you're seeing is that a lot of players are actually playing around Syndra instead in the Faded line, instead of Aphelios, and they're just using Aphelios for early game tempo. But it gets a little bit awkward because your item economy, you kind of end up wanting to itemize the Thresh, but then you want items on Aphelios so that you're actually killing units, but then now you're out of items and components that you want for your Syndra, and things can get a little bit awkward there. I personally actually really avoid Faded as well in general, just because it's not necessarily bad, but again, it just requires a lot to get online, and to really get there, usually you need something that's going to help really boost things together. More specifically, I always think about Scuttle Puddle. If I'm in Scuttle Puddle, I'm a little more open to Faded because of all the extra resources, and you go like, hey, Aphelios 3 Thresh 3 shouldn't be that hard to hit with that much extra gold. So just keep that in mind. I think whenever I see Aphelios also do well, it's always usually in Scuttle Puddle. So if you're ever in that realm, feel free to try it out, because I think a lot of the times in regular portals, no one's really leading Aphelios anymore, but in Scuttle Puddle, who knows? I mean, it sounds pretty dandy to me. And the thing is that, by the way, this line is just much more consistent than Bard, at least from my experience. So if you're gonna play like a 3-cost reroll line that revolves around Ginsu's, I would say try to lean Aphelios rather than Bard, but obviously play what you hit. Just to keep in mind as well, again, like I said before, a lot of people are playing around like Aphelios 2 rather than Aphelios 3, and then just tempoing that into a Syndra board, and then playing around 7 Faded with Syndra, because then that way you also get the Orn on the board, and then you don't have to find a weird way to try to tech in a sniper somewhere, because on 8, the board doesn't really fit in a sniper unless you have an emblem. So that's where, you know, people are kind of struggling with. Again, these are the stats: 4.38, 51.3%. Again, it's not like amazing by any means, but with the Syndra 2, you're averaging like a 3.9. Top 4 rate of about 60% if you get to that Syndra 2. So still, very, very solid line, just not something that I personally really enjoy. Let's put it that way. Moving on, Warden's Ashe. I actually didn't cover this in the first time I did the meta analysis, but in this one, I did want to talk about it a little bit because I kind of got clapped by it. Like literally about an hour ago, I played my last game. I hit triple digits, and I went, okay, that's enough for today. I'm gonna do the meta analysis because I've been kind of slacking on it, and I know I needed to re-record it, and then I didn't fucking do it. But we're here. We're solid, all right. At least we're here, all right. We're doing, you know, gotta congratulate yourselves whenever you do something good for yourself, you know, or for your community or whatever. You get the idea. Before I keep stalling, sorry. Let's talk about the board. So in general, for Warden and Ashe, typically I want to cap out with 4 Porcelain. The problem is that hitting a Lysandra on 8 is kind of tough. So 6 Warden can actually be fine for this variation to just get you to 9, and then you play around 4 Porcelain and cap out that way, and with legendaries, of course. The thing about this board is that I actually don't think it's like amazing by any means, but it's more of a tempo board, if anything. Like, you're playing strong board, you have like a Ginsu's and like this GS, and you're like, okay, I gotta play around some level of like attack speed. Maybe I play around Irelia, maybe I play around, I don't know, Aphelios 2 and try to tempo in with Faded or whatever. Whatever your game plan is. In general, when it comes to the Ashe line, Ashe is actually a little more clickable than I think people give her credit for. Ashe is actually a pretty decent unit now. She's not like a spectacular 4 cost, but she's actually not even that bad. She's actually fine and does dish out the damage that you need. And most of the time, I would argue she's kind of like this conveyor belt that gets you to 9. Like, you can play an Ashe 2 and not feel too bad about it, especially if you're playing from ahead and you're trying to play tempo and you're okay bleeding a little bit during stage 4 to try to get to level 9. So I definitely would recommend trying it out. It's definitely not bad. In terms of itemizations, obviously Faded Crest is in here because, like, you know, if you're playing an Ashe on your board, you're probably playing Faded. But in terms of itemization, usually Ginzu's Last Whisper +1, usually Gunblade actually of all things, but you can also do things like the Deathblade, things like the GS. Those are all totally fine. Runans is obviously very, very great on her. But this is also just the game that I just played right before this. Like, the lobby itself wasn't like too particularly strong. Obviously you see Yone 3 at the top, but it actually ended up losing to the Porcelain Ashe board. So just keep that in mind. I actually think it has a lot more credibility than people give it credit for. But again, here are the stats in case you're interested. For Warden, for Porcelain, it's a 4.3. It's actually slightly better than Syndra and 7 Faded. So keep it in mind. It's really not a bad board. I think, like, if you are finding yourself with like an early Ashe and Ginsu, you can maybe consider it. Like, I actually don't think it's that bad. But anyways, moving on to the actual main 4-cost line carry, which is Bruiser Kai'Sa, or Kai'Sa in general. For Bruiser Kai'Sa has been around since the PBE. It's been one of these compositions that's been something that everyone's been playing for a very long time. Let's just put it that way. It's been around for a while. Everyone's aware of it. It's just 4 trickshot for Bruiser. Play 3 Story Weaver. You want the attacks to be kill for your Kai'Sa. Kai'Sa itemization, i.e. Last Whisper Deathblade. Obviously, she's very flexible in terms of what she wants, but Last Whisper in particular is super nice because her trick shot ability will just hit the backline and then their armor gets shredded and you have a good time. So Last Whisper is like turbo bis, and then everything else is like great. Obviously, IE is amazing, but things like Deathblade, things like GS, things like Runans, you don't have to feel bad about playing these items. Totally very solid comp. In terms of this line in particular, though, the way you cap out is usually just going 9 and you just tech in an Udyr. That way you get the 3 Inkshadow in case the Inkshadow item is good. Or you can start slowly teching out of the Bruisers and try to cap out with other legendaries, things like your Ornn and things like, I don't know, Nautilus Set, whatever you manage to find. Totally okay, makes a lot of sense. Silas really likes TG, by the way. Never really want to itemize him as your main tank. Galio does take on that role. But obviously, if you've played the slime before, you know that Galio kind of feels not as tanky as he should for like a 2-star 4-cost. You know, he's a bruiser, but then he just gets bruised a little too hard, and then you're like, what the fuck? This thing kind of sucks. But I mean, in terms of actual like item carries for your main tanks, you don't really have anything better. So stick with the Galio. It's fine. It'll get you to 9. Don't worry about it. And then it's not as bad as it feels sometimes. I promise you. You might also notice as well the Xayah's on the board as well. Xayah did get buffs in the recent patch, and Xayah is perfectly capable of being itemized. Now, if you told me, hey, what is better, a Kai'Sa 1 or a Xayah 2? I don't really know. I'm going to be honest. I don't know. Because the problem is that at any point in the game, it's easier to hit that Kai'Sa 2 than it is to hit that Xayah 2. Right? But if you have Xayah 2, I mean, you should feel comfortable itemizing it, but it should be fine. I don't actually know. I haven't had the balls to try it. So if you know, if you're like, hey, Xayah 2 feels better, you fucking dumbass, it should. Like, theoretically, it should. But, you know, that's not how the game always plays out. So, you know, I don't fucking know. Like, if Kai'Sa's like mega contested, obviously just itemize the Xayah, but you get the idea. Just let me know what you find. But moving on, going into Lucky Paws. Now, Lucky Paws is an augment that has just came out of fucking nowhere, to be completely honest. The shit got turbo buffed and they got turbo nerfed in the P patch. So it's good. It's actually very solid now. So if you actually hit Lucky Paws, you can actually consider playing the line. Itemizations for Kabuko is not exactly what you expect. You kind of expect like tank items, but he actually prefers BT Titans +1, usually Redemptions or Declaw. But if you're really strapped for a tank item, you can actually go for something like a Sterax. I believe Ray Implosion on Twitter, I did have their tweet open and then I closed it accidentally. I'm sorry, but they did the math. I think it was Brosif TFT who did the original math, but they found out that, hey, if your unit has at least like 2.3k HP or something around that number, you will have more HP than a Warmogs would have given you. So keep that in mind. Sterax is definitely like actually okay. It's not that bad, but that's assuming that you're pretty strapped for like that 3rd item, which would be kind of weird because you have a belt and you just need a tier and you just never found a tier, so you had to slam a Sterax. Maybe for tempo, I don't really know. In terms of itemizations, or sorry, not in terms of itemizations, but in terms of the way to actually play the comp, it's just vertical bruisers, and then backline can be literally whatever. Obviously, the ideal scenario is something like a Kai'Sa in the backline with 4 trick shot, and funny enough, if this looks any bit familiar to you, you can actually drop down to 4 bruisers and you just play 4 bruiser, 4 trick shot again. The only difference is that you're playing it with Lucky Paws. You can actually just go 6 bruisers instead with 2 trick shot in the back. You can also do things like an Aurelia 1. Kobuko does a lot of fucking work. Like, a lot of work. You'd be very surprised. So if you just go 6 bruiser with like 2 things in the back, just smacking things just for insurance, it's usually good enough. You can even go AP in the backline, at least from what I've seen, and it seems to be okay. Other augments to just consider while you're playing this line are Well-Fed and Dragon Spirit, especially at 3-2. Super dope augment to take. Basically, you just get that free declaw onto your Kabuko at 3-2, and it's one of his best items, and it'll farm your components because he heals so fucking much with declaw. Like, it's absolutely absurd. You get to farm your components pretty quickly, so definitely would recommend that. And that's basically it. Obviously, this is just a sample board at the end. It's very easy to tech into 3 Story Weaver just because to hit 3 Story Weaver, you just need 1 more. So Irelia in the back is totally acceptable as well. And you just fill in the rest. Things like Lee Sin for the duelists. Rakan would fit in with Lee Sin because of Dragon Lords. And it can literally be whatever. Maybe you hit fucking, I don't know, you fucking Kiana and Wukong or whatever. It does not matter. Like, you can literally fit in whatever. It's very easy. So, anyways, enjoy this one. I don't think it wins out a lot of the time. You'd have to hit like something like 8 Bruiser. 8 Bruiser is disgustingly strong. I got to play it 1 time. It's super fun, but it's very hard to hit. Like, you need to find that crest somewhere along the lines, and most of the time you don't ever really find it, or you have to go 9 to tech into 8 Bruiser usually, so just keep it in mind. I mean, obviously if you don't Bruiser crest your carry, then you can just do 8 Bruiser on 8, but normally you want to go 9, so just keep it in mind. But moving on, Senna Shen. Senna Shen is one of those compositions that's been around for a while now. It's been around ever since fucking the Senna, Senna Nar days of like the early parts of set 11. Basically, this was like the revamped version of it because people realized, hey, wait a minute, Ghostly's kind of fucking good. So obviously, you just reroll on 6. You just go for the Senna 3, the Shen 3, and sometimes Aatrox 3. It doesn't hurt to pick it up on the way. I've noticed that nowadays, along with a lot of reroll lines, you kind of want to be picking up a lot of the same cost units on your way as you're rolling. It feels like it kind of griefs your econ, but if you're thinking about 50, it doesn't. And funny enough, you're thinning out the pool, grabbing more units at the same cost, and it at the end of the day, it's actually pretty beneficial because of how small the unit pools are. So I would actually recommend like trying to also hit that Aatrox 3. You don't have to force it because it's not a very good unit, but in terms of making your rolls easier and a bit more efficient, you can actually start picking up the Aatroxes, and just if you hit it, you hit it. And a lot of the times you actually end up hitting it because no one in the right mind is trying to play around like an Aatrox carry. But it's very simple. On 6, the board is obviously no Morgana, no Kayn, and then as you level, you just play the Morgana and the Kayn, 6 Ghostly, and then just take it from there, right? Very simple. Obviously, in terms of the best things or tattoos that you can put in this comp, it is not Vitality, by the way. That is a fucking meme. That tattoo sucks. But Protection and Toxin are the 2 big ones that you really want to keep in mind. Toxin is basically like a red buff better for your Senna, and Protection is basically like the best tank item you could ever get for your Shen. So if you have any of these 2 tattoos as your Inkshadow item for your first one, you should really consider trying to play and lead into this line because it's actually very consistent, especially even now. It's kind of decent into Yone specifically too, by the way, because your fights are quick. You're playing Ghostly, right? So as soon as those contagion procs, or rather the Ghostly procs, you are doing a lot of fucking damage. You're kind of like bursting down a lot of things. And what people have realized is that, hey, if I just burst down the Yone before I burst me down, I win. I fucking win. And then it's a good time and everyone's happy. And Yone sucks. And then you get a shit on the Yone player. And everybody is just like jovial and shit. So just keep it in mind. Really solid line. I actually lean this quite often myself. It's one of my main lines just because I think it's just super solid and it's very easy and brain dead to pilot. But just keep it in mind. One last thing also, pumping up, very solid augment. If you take pumping up, you can really consider Senna. It's one of my favorite things. Obviously, you don't have to just stick with Senna. You can just go 6 Ghostly and tempo and try to play around something like a Kai'Sa in the backline or something even like Ashe in the backline, which again gets a really bad rep, but it really isn't that bad. Even in 6 Ghostly, it's actually not that bad. So give it a try. I actually think it's good. It's good. It's good. You can trust me. It's good. Moving on. 6 duelists. Duelist has resurfaced into the meta because of this one fucking bear. Volibear 2 kind of suffers the same syndrome as Yone, where Yone 2-starred feels like a 4.5 cost, and then Volley 2-starred feels like a 4 cost. I don't know. I don't make the fucking rules. It just feels like that. And this Volibear, if you've ever had to deal with it, it feels unkillable sometimes during the mid game. The big reason is because this composition, by the way, if you're not succeeding with duelists, and even though this is like an S tier line, by the way, if you're not succeeding with it, it's probably because of your augments. This composition is very heavily reliant on strong augments to help really exponentially increase the potential of this board. So things like Extended Duel, things like Keepers, and Gargantuan Resolve are the 3 big ones that you really want to keep an eye out for, where if you see any of these augments, you should think, hey, I should probably want to play Volibear. Am I flipping you off? I'm sorry. I don't know why I did this. That was weird, like a little pose. But anyways, that was odd. But Keepers is great. The reason why Keepers is great, even though it's not great in like literally any other composition, is because Keepers basically allows your duelists to just get to the maximum stacks they need to really hit, you know, really ramp up their damage. So it just buys them a little bit of extra time. And it doesn't really grief your position. You're gonna usually clump to a decent degree anyways. Janna also doesn't mind clumping as well. She just jumps backwards, so totally fine. Obviously on 7, hitting an Aurelia and a Rakan are very unlikely. This would just be a Diana, and this would just be your Darius until you find them. Obviously, augments like Duelist Crest are great as well, because you just get to play 8 Duelists and you just have a very good time, because 8 Duelists is super strong. Just make sure you scout, because there was a game I played earlier today where I was playing Duelist. I took Duelist Crest 2-1. I didn't really think about it. And then like 2 rounds later, there's a guy I see with Gargantuan Resolve with Titans BT. And I was like, you know what? He has it on a Volley Bear, but he's only 2 Duelists and he has a Yone on bench. He's probably playing Yone. Nope. I got my ass wiped because this motherfucker decided to play Volley Bear and contest. And then they got Hero Grab Bag, hit all the 3 stars, and I went 8th. So this line fucking sucks if you're contested. I'm just going to warn you. But if you're not contested, you're good to go. Also, just a little caveat, a little aside. That game I just referenced, funny enough, he hit Volley 3 and he only had he had like Tristana 2, and then I had Volley 2, but then I had 7 Tristanas. So I was like, okay, cool, handshake. We both get the different things in the duelist. Fine, fair enough. We're contested, that's fine. I did not hit Tristana 3 that game. I wrote down 70 gold on 7. I hit 1 more Tristana. I look over to his motherfucking board and it's a Tristana 3 and a Volley 3 staring me down the face. That shit was fucked up. I don't know your name, by the way, but if I find you, I hate you, man. Fuck you. Well, honestly, like, fuck me. Like, I suck. Like, that's just a PD, but I'm just kidding. No hard feelings. But moving on. Midnight Siphon. Midnight Siphon is great. It's a very third augment, as in you take this augment and you will go third. The reason being is because I don't know what the fuck kills a Yorick in the early game when you take Midnight Siphon. As long as you have a BT or Redemption or something on it, it doesn't fucking die. I've seen it scam the most ridiculous fights during stage 2 and stage 3, and it's just unbelievable. Like, I'm not even talking Yorick 2. I'm talking like Yorick 1. Like, this thing's a monster. It's a fucking menace. I don't get it. It's very simple. It's just 6 behemoths. Flex backline. Very similar to Kabuko, if you remember we were talking about earlier. Yep. But if you hit Raid Boss, by the way, 3-2, insta take. Insta take it. Midnight Siphon Raid Boss, top 2. Easy, done, clap your hands. You do not have to do much this game. It's a very, very simple, more dog bless you this one time. Just take it and leave it, okay? I will say this though, in terms of itemizations, BT Redemption +1 is usually best. I don't remember if people want Titans on York specifically. I think they do. Funny enough, BT Titans just popped. The synergy is just too good, so you see it all the time. But BT Titans is also probably pretty solid. Things like Declaw are totally fine as well. There is actually a bit of an interesting variation that I had thought of the other day. The reason being is because when it comes to your backline, it's really flexible, but the problem is that there's also like, hey, like what can I actually play in the backline? You know, if you're re-rolling on 6 odds, you kind of want a 2 cost in the backline, right? So funny enough, I kind of thought about this Lux line. There are no games of this played, like 0, and I don't really understand why not. The board on 6 makes a lot of sense. The cap makes a lot of sense because the idea is that you just drop Nico eventually and you just play 4 porcelain. So it would just for, you know, because nobody's played this fucking line, myself included. I haven't had a chance and I really want to try it. You just play this. And capiche capash. It's pretty solid. Like it looks fine to me. Like I actually don't see any problems with this. And the thing is that you might be thinking like, oh, a Lux 3. Like who the fuck is playing a Lux 3? Well, like in case you forgot, in the A patch, Twin Terror Lux was a fucking demon. Like it was Sukuna on like another level. Like it was disgusting. And they had to disable the fucking augment because they were like, hey, this Lux unit it's too fucking good. Like we gotta put an end to it. So they fucking domain expansion that shit and then it just bye-byed. Like if you don't watch JJK, by the way, you don't know what I'm talking about. It's fine. Just forget it. But the point is that Lux 3 by yourself, it's still a very solid unit. You can still play it on Lux 3 and it's totally fine. I think right now, I think the main line with Lux 3 is like 6 Arcanists, but I'm not entirely sure. I think it's like Lux 3, like a Mumu 3. I don't play it, to be honest. I don't know. But Lux 3 is very, very solid by herself anyways. So I don't really see a reason why you wouldn't just play something like Lux 3 in the back and then just cap around Porcelain with Behemoth and just call it a day. Usually when it comes to Midnight Siphon, playing 6 and playing 4 Behemoth, there isn't too much of a difference, to be completely honest with you. It feels like the same thing. It's just York suck the fuck out of everybody. And that's the fucking game. That's the fight. I would try it. I would be down to see people try this line and then try this out. Obviously, you could just go 6 behemoth instead of 4 porcelain, because like, why does 4 porcelain matter that much more? I mean, 4 porcelain is broken, but like fuck it. You want to cook extra? Like fuck it. Porcelain Yorick. Who cares? Like I actually like. It could be a very good time. I actually don't think it's that bad. But try it out. Obviously, the other argument is, hey, what about Senna? Senna's just contested all the time. So I didn't really think about it. But I think Lux is totally okay. It's significantly less contested, at least from my experience. So try it out. Let me know what you think. But again, just to give you an idea, there's been 4 games in this Diamond Plus. All of them top 4s. They all averaged a 3. Exactly 3. That means everybody went 3rd. But nobody won. So, I mean, I don't know. It looks fine to me. It looks fine to me. Like 2 times out of 3 they went 9, so that should be a good sign. But anyways, moving on, kog'maw reroll. We won't stick around too much on kog'maw reroll. Kog'maw reroll has just been around for a while. It was good last patch. It's still very good this patch despite the nerfs. It's a very slight nerf, by the way, but basically the idea is simple. Just reroll on 5 kog'maw and cho'gath. All you gotta do. Typically when you're playing the line, by the way, though, funny enough, you actually end up restarting like a lot of fucking units. Don't feel pressured by like whatchamacallit, headliners. I almost forgot the fucking mechanic from last set. Don't be pressured by headliners tempo from last set. Like last set, it was kind of expected you hit your 3-star 1 cost by like 3-5, sometimes even 3-1. But quite honestly, you're kind of slow rolling for a very long time. And usually it's like until 4-1, where you hit the kog'maw 3, the cho'gath 3, the Malphite 3, and like even the Caitlyn 3. So like I said before, like with reroll, there's a bit of a common trend nowadays of like holding the same tier of units. And I really recommend if you're playing this line, hold the cho'gaths, hold the kog'maws, hold the Caitlyn's, hold the Malphites, and see where it goes. You might actually accidentally find yourself in a weird situation where sometimes you hit cho'gath 3, Malphite 3, Caitlyn 3, and then you're stuck on a cog 2 with like no other copies. I'm not even fucking kidding. That happened to me earlier today. A lot of things happened today. I played for quite a bit today. I'm not proud of it, but hey, life experiences are important. Anyways, the point is, it's a demon. If you hit Cog 3, Cho 3, Malphite 3, and you're still relatively healthy, you're in for a good time. Augments to keep in mind. Dragon Spirit. Super fucking good. If you hit Dragon Spirit and you have a decent Cog opener, just fucking take it. It's solid. Your cho'gath will farm you the components. Don't worry about it. And it's one of his best items. It's super great. Make sure to spark the cho'gath though. Just keep in mind. Too much candy. Also very, very fucking good. Obviously, if you're in that one portal where Bard levels everybody 3 and then you're level 4 on 2-1, it fucking sucks. Don't take it in that one scenario, and you shouldn't be playing Cog reroll in that portal unless like some disgusting opener presents itself, and even then I would be a little hesitant. Too much candy is disgusting. It's very good. You just use all your free rolls on level 3, hit all the cogs of the Chos and the Mouse and the Caitlyn's. You get the idea. It's a very good time. Very easy line to pivot, or very easy line to pilot. Shouldn't be too bad. Buried Treasures has very good stats in this as well. The only reason is just because there's a lot of units you want to be itemizing, the cho'gath, the kog'maw, and whatever you're else 3-starring. Caitlyn 3 with 3 items. Very fucking solid for mid game and even a little bit into the late game. She just snipes things every once in a while and then they just die. Like, oh, you had a Kaisa, bye-bye, and then it's just gone. Malphite 3, just solid tank. Just itemize it. Who fucking cares? The idea is, also, Lilia. You do want to eventually itemize your Lilia 2. This is like your secondary carry. Lilia 2 as a primary carry, sucks to take. Terrible. Wouldn't ever want that anywhere near me. But, as a secondary carry and kog'maw reroll, very fantastic. Does her job. Very great. She can also hold things like the Morello and the Shiv, so if you need that little bit of utility on your board, she is a great item holder. Obviously, Hui is better for both of those things, but, you know, Lilia 2 before Hui 2 is significantly more likely. Let's just keep that in mind. But anyways, moving on to Janna reroll. This is a bit of a cook. Actually, funny enough, we did a VOD review on this yesterday on, I believe, Soju had played this line, and it looks very solid. I'm not gonna lie, I played it a couple times today, and I actually really like it. I really like having like an AP line I don't feel too bad about rerolling on 6 with, and Janna just happens to fill in that gap. It isn't like an S tier line by any means. It's very difficult to hit everything because it's a bit awkward. You have Janna 3 and you have Diana 3. So the way you normally pilot this is that you roll on 6 and you slow roll and you try to hit like a decent amount of Jannas. And when I mean decent, I mean basically the majority, like 7 or 8 of them. And then once you hit that much, think about your position a bit. Like, okay, should I really level to 9 or level to 7 here and then should I roll for the Dianas? Or do I want to stay on 6 because I've already hit the Diana and like, you know, I'm just one of Janna 3, you know? Think about your position, think about how the lobby tempo is going. It requires a bit more critical thinking than regular reroll lines because of, you know, the weird dynamic of 2 cost and 3 cost that you're rerolling for, but it's still very, very solid. You can also go for things like the Zyra 3, things like Soraka 3. Just be careful because Zyra 3 isn't really a primary carry, Soraka 3 isn't really either, but they're both incredible TG holders. So actually, augments like Bandit Thieves is actually really great in this if you know you're already playing this line, because you just get a Thief's Glove like whoever's in the back line with you, because you're just, you know, pulling out units at the same cost. Again, the same idea. Pull units at the same cost. You're gonna probably be doing that a lot. Hold the Nikos, hold the Rivens, hold the Zyros, hold the Sorakos, hold the Zoes, hold the Dianas, and then just 3-star whatever you find first. Basic rule of thumb. The only you know thing you have to keep in mind is Diana 3, Janna 3, top priority. You have to hit these. Everything else extraneous. But if you find them, good job, well done. You'll probably top 4. The line, it's good. Don't get me wrong, it's good, but you do need a good start for it. You can't just like lose streak to like 60 HP and then just pivot into it. You're not gonna have a good time. It doesn't win out, but it's solid. So I would recommend it from like a decent, healthy spot, you know? Anyways, moving on, mulched. Broken as fuck. I don't get it. This augment, I don't get it. It's so fucking good. It's so good. I'm pretty sure Moy said that they're probably gonna nerf this augment, but mulched is disgusting. You just reroll on 6, you just go for the Nar 3 Kindred 3, and if you get very lucky, you will find your 1 Orn on 6. It's a 5% chance. Good luck, buddy. But if you hit it, congratulations. 4 Dryad on 6, you're super fucking solid. You're super stable. This mulched augment is not okay. I actually started holding Nars nowadays in like my stage 1, if it doesn't grief, you know, the units that I actually want too hard, because on the off chance that I get mulched, I'm just forcing mulched. It's so good. Nobody's touching this Nar unit anyway, so you're like never contested, and it's fucking solid. Kindred does a decent amount of damage. You realize it has Reaper activated here, but that's only until you hit the Cane. But even without the Cane, you're totally fine. Yeah, and you just play 4 Dryad, 4 Ghostly. Super fucking solid. And eventually, if you get lucky enough, you just find a Dryad crash somewhere. Congratulations. Hit 6 Dryad. Done. The game's over. In terms of actual item holders for the Dryad crest, I actually like Shen the most. Obviously this is under the, you know, the pretense that you're hitting Shen 3, which you should be holding on your rolls anyways. There's no reason not to. You can also do like Dryad Aatrox. If you hit Aatrox 3 for some reason, that's totally fine. Obviously again, the end cap is to just try to hit the Enzir on 9 with 4 Ghostly, but 6 Dryad and like 3 Ghostly, it's probably still super solid, and it's probably still better than 4 Dryad, 4 Ghostly, just because 6 Dryad is so fucking gross. It's so strong, and it's just one of those verticals you don't see too often, but when you do fight it, you are not in a good time. It fucking sucks because it's too good. Obviously, Nar items, Titans, BT, just the same way it has always been in the Senna Nar variation. With Kindred, red buff, blue buff, so actually we finally have a purple buff holder, wahoo. With Rabadon's totally fine. Obviously, Morel is probably slightly better, but honestly, I think Kindred actually really likes the attack speed, especially because she likes to cast a lot. So I actually don't think purple buff Kindred is bad at all. Rabadon's is just for that extra damage amp because you need damage somewhere. And the Rek'Sai 3 is just extraneous. If you happen to find it, congratulations, but you don't. It's not a priority by any means. But Rek'Sai 3 is still Rek'Sai 3. Like, it's still a very solid unit to keep in your front line. So just keep that in mind. Next up, vertical Inkshadow has sort of surfaced in the meta. It's one of those lines that nobody tried to bother playing because it's weird. The reason it's weird is because to hit the 7, you need Udyr. And Udyr is like one of, if not the most contested 5 cost behind Xayah. It's fucking hard to hit an Udyr. Actually, no, I would actually argue Udyr is like the most contested 5 cost. It's just so good for utility. So it's hard to hit on 8. And then on top of that, you do need to play around with Kai'Sa. And it's like, well, why would I play around Kai'Sa in Inkshadows? Excuse me. I had like mentaiko pasta. I don't know if you've ever had that before. That's just bullshit. But like my mom bought me like this sauce pack like a while back, and it makes me kind of gassy. But anyways, before I got really interrupted by my natural gases, that's a sentence I never thought I'd say. Kai'Sa 2. Why the fuck would I play around Kai'Sa 2 with an Inkshadow crest and try to gamble for Udyr on 8 when I could just play 4 trickshot, 4 bruiser, and just call it a day? I don't know. Maybe you just feel like it. The point is, Inkshadow crest is still very, very solid to take, and maybe you have a strong Inkshadow opener. The point about Inkshadow is that 5 is very solid for the mid game. Early to mid game, it's super solid, having 2 tattoos and a little bit of damage reduction. It's super great. If you don't know what I'm talking about, because maybe you've never touched 5 Inkshadow in your life, and I don't blame you, basically, once you hit the 5, you get 5% more bonus damage, and you get 5% damage reduction. So, getting that little bit of bonus amp is nice, and a second tattoo feels super great. It's, again, very strong for the mid game, and it's very easy to tempo with it into level 8, and as long as you find like a Kai'Sa, and then maybe you high roll that Udyr, once you hit 7, you're in for a very good time. Super solid line. In terms of tattoos that you really want, it's really more just like, you don't want vitality. You can have like anything else, just Vitality sucks, but just because you see Vitality inside your Inkshadow traits doesn't mean you shouldn't play the line if it's force-fed to you, right? Things like Protection is great on Ornn, things like Fury or Bombardment are great on Kai'Sa, things like the Tattoo of Force is great on Udyr. Vitality can eat a dick. I'm missing one, I don't remember what to, oh, sorry. Toxin. Toxin is great on like any AD carry. It's totally fine. So I would highly recommend still playing this line. It's super fun. I'm not gonna lie. Getting all those tattoos and your board looks kind of cool because the tattoo items are cool looking. It's a good time. So I would recommend it, but it's not every game. It's like 1 in every like 10, maybe 20. I'd say closer to 20. So just keep it in mind. But lastly, let's talk about Bill Gates. Bill Gates Fast 9. The reason why I want to talk about this at all, because it seems like it doesn't really change per patch, but it does. Like the units that you should prioritize change every single patch, and the way that you approach it does change sometimes every patch depending on what it is. Usually it's some dickhead with 5 fortune on stage 2 and you're crying yourself to sleep. But you know, there are times you're going to play Fast 9 and it's a viable strategy. So let's talk about it. So first off, what you're looking at right now is sort of like I want to say the main Fast 9 board from last patch. And it's slightly changed this patch. And the reason why is because some units have been slightly buffed. And we're sort of starting to see a shift in the sort of priorities, if you will. The big thing is that like single target DPS or just units that can really melt down and focus fire a unit, it's super valuable now. So being able to melt down a Yone, being able to melt down any sort of like volley bear, right? Instead of having the damage that sort of swirls around like an Aurelia blade, right? Or like the Azir, which like sort of sets a beam and just like one cast and hopes it bursts it. You really want that like that focus fire, things that are gonna really like burn and break down a specific unit, because nowadays we're seeing a lot of hyper carries or even 2 hyper carries just absolutely annihilating boards. So nowadays, at least in the current meta, units like Kai'Sa are actually incredibly great at countering this problem. Obviously, units like Lissandra are great as well. So let's talk a little bit about the cap when it comes around playing around Kai'Sa specifically, because nowadays Kai'Sa seems to be the better cap than Irelia, which sounds crazy to say, but it's kind of true. Kai'Sa with the two trick shots plus her inkshadow, assuming the inkshadow is good, does a lot. It does a lot of work, and the fact that it's focus fire, despite the fact that she might be doing a little less damage than something like an Aurelia would, isolating that damage just feels so much better, just does so much more for you. So in terms of the cap now, usually what people are doing is that instead of playing around Aurelia, they do Kai'Sa with Xayah instead. They don't play Rakan anymore, and you play a volley bear on your board to get that duelist and inkshadow in. And it's a very interesting way to cap out your board. This is something that I think Dish Soap was talking about actually I think a day or 2 ago on Twitter. He was talking about Dragon Lords and Kai'Sa and then getting to 9 with it, and then capping out with this like 3-4 Dragon Lord. It should be 4 Dragon Lord, by the way. I don't know why I said the 3, but 3-4 Dragon Lord board. Sorry, it's because Rakan's on the fucking board. 4 Dragon Lord is ideal. You really want that stun at 4. But it's really, really fucking solid, and it just, all the traits line up very beautifully, and it just makes sense. You get the Inkshadow item for your Kai'Sa, you get the Azir who helps you out with that little bit of bursty damage with the AoE to help get that extra kick in case Kai'Sa doesn't burst it all the way down. Xayah is still a very solid unit by herself now. Ornn is still that best tank inside of the game, gets to farm your items, gets to tank a lot of damage, and Udyr is there to just disrupt and just cause a fucking scene, basically. Again, very cool, interesting way of capping out the board. There are obviously other ways of capping out, things like using the Amumu and the Lissandra. Just taking out a random Lissandra on your board is usually also a very like solid play, but just keep in mind that there's sort of like these sort of picture perfect ideal level 9 boards, but then getting to that level 10 and then really capping out with the Lissandra and like the Amumu and like the set and all this stuff, all that jazz. You know, it's something to keep in mind. It's like your way to get there, you know. I feel like in this video I've said a lot of keep in mind. There's a lot of things to keep in mind. This set, there's a fuck ton. Don't even get me started on counters. Which by the way, fucking counters. Okay, that was kind of harsh. I just strongly dislike encounters. That's probably a video for a different time. But actually, you know what? Let me know what you think. Let me know if you guys like encounters or not, because personally I've not been the biggest fan. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. But anyways, I hope this is helpful. I hope you guys learned something. I apologize for this coming out like a couple days late. That wasn't my intent. Again, the video file corrupted and then I couldn't re-download it on Twitch for some reason. I don't know what's going on. But if you were there during the stream, @9underscore_kai, you would know everything we've talked about today. But that basically does it. Hope you guys learned something. Take care, guys. Ooh, sorry. A little bit of a little choke there. But yeah, happy climbing.